I would also characterize it this way, and it sort of dovetails on what you're saying. You know, when we set up our systems a long time ago, right? We set up our systems such that we needed people to represent ourselves. We needed to trust people and entities. And for whatever reason, I think that there was a degree of trust that I think in 2020 it's just not there anymore, right? So we all vote, we go through a process, and that process is designed to build in trust. We're supposed to have people from both sides. There's supposed to be all kinds of checks and balances. But for whatever reason, right, there's that trust is broken. And what we're talking about is just counting votes, right? We're just talking about counting stuff, right? This isn't philosophy, right? It's not, it's math. And what happened in 2000, well, the late late 80s, early 90s, and then 2008, right, with this concept of blockchain and Bitcoin, right? And saying, look, we don't have to trust the banks, we don't have to trust a central authority. We now have a mechanism where we can now, look, we're talking about counting. Why is it that we all give our votes to a small number of people? And we could say, hey, you know, one's got an R after their name, one's got a D after their name, but we give our votes to a small number of people, and then they get to tell us who won, right? And so my understanding, and I'm not a voting expert, but my understanding is that there's a small number of companies, right, that commercially that build the infrastructure, and a lot of people ask the question, with that much power, with the power of deciding national elections and who gets to spend literally trillions of dollars, right? With that being in the hands of a small number of people, I just think that we ought to ask ourselves, are there ways to bring more transparency into that so that more people can have trust? And I think that these issues are tough. There's all kinds of legal and regulatory issues. There's technical issues, right? This is not an easy conversation. But I'm hoping that in the elections in the future, we won't have as many people saying, no, I don't believe you, right? That's the thing. That if we could get on the other side of that, I think we would have huge attraction.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that when we talk about advancing elections and we talk about advancing the technology, of course, the big topic comes up on security. And I think that when we look at, in fact, Larry, who's on this call, he sent me an article that he wrote on election day, and it was a fantastic article. I don't know, Gerard, if you are okay, if we just include him on this topic real quick. You want to unmute Larry, because I'd love to ask Larry about this. I know you're going to be talking about accessibility later, but right now I want to talk a little bit about the article that you wrote that I read yesterday. And you talked about how security experts or cybersecurity experts, when they talk about the cybersecurity of elections, and we'll go into the details of security later, but Larry, you started an election company, one of the most recent election companies called Clear Ballot. So you understand the election world. And your article wasn't written from the point of view of a cybersecurity expert. It was written from the point of view as an elections expert. And I really loved how you talked about that cybersecurity experts look at elections in a vacuum. And they say, well, cybersecurity isn't actually secure, so we can't use it in our elections. And your point was, no way of running an election is 100% secure. So I want to kind of tee you up by saying, you know, it's common knowledge in the election world that former President Lyndon B. Johnson stole his Senate election. They found out 2 years after he was elected that they had stuffed the ballot boxes with paper ballots. But he was already a senator, so they left him sitting in office, and then he ended up the vice president and then the president. And so when I hear cybersecurity experts say we have to use paper at the polls on election day because it's the only thing that's secure, I can't help but laugh, because we have proof that paper at the polls on election day has stolen elections, right? So as an election expert, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about this idea of moving into a technology era with elections and how that compares to what we have today.
And one thing real quick, Larry, before we get started, Amelia, I also have Eugene with us. Eugene has got to leave a little bit early because he's got another commitment he's got to take care of. So Larry, I'd love for you to address it, and then after that, Amelia, and I'm throwing a little bit of a monkey wrench into your plan. I'm sorry. Could we then have Eugene maybe talk a little bit about security, and then we'll come back to accessibility after that. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I think that sounds great. If that's okay with you, Larry, if we can talk about this and then Eugene can do security and then we'll head to accessibility. I'm fine with that.
Good. So thanks for the introduction, Amelia. And I've gotten quite a few good comments on the article I posted on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn page on the afternoon of Election Day before the polls had closed. And so let me sort of pick up the thread that you asked me to, but start off by saying that as kind of a practitioner in this space for the last dozen years, I think we've got the notion of security all wrong. And we talk about security as though it is a destination, that a system is either secure or it is not. And I think if we reflect carefully, even just a little bit, we would know that security is a continuum. It is a journey and not a destination. And I use a good example. I use an analogy that says, if the quest is always for a bigger, stronger padlock, there will always be someone that comes along with a bigger, stronger bolt cutter. And so state of the art in security is really not these days around, putting a padlock on a system, but it is to surround the affected area, in this case elections, with surveillance. Can we know when something has intruded, and ideally detect it, analyze it, and correct for it in near real time? That is the state of the art that we should be. So it's really resilience that we should be talking about, and not security. And here is the proof that no system can claim to be secure against an unknown threat, by definition. So where I am right now in my little personal odyssey is to try to educate policymakers on the need for an ongoing process to get to higher levels of security and trust. And really, trust is the big thing these days in election. And I'll take issue with you, Gerard, on it's only counting votes. That would be a really narrow view of what we in the election industry go through. The much more difficult problem is building trust. And we've seen an assault on the trustworthiness of the elections in this current administration that is terrible. And that's all I will say about that. But and I'll just leave it at this, and we can come back to it when the next person talks about security. I started Clear Ballot with an idea around trust, and we introduced a visual method of looking at the aggregate vote in a way that the state of Maryland, the state of Florida, New York State, Vermont, and a few others are using to do audits. And in Florida next year, they'll use the visual technology to resolve close elections. And you can use this visual technology in a matter of minutes to resolve an election, a contest that's close, even with one vote difference, in a matter of less than an hour. So there's all kinds of, and I see blockchain technology as a really important tool to not only secure the aggregate vote, but to secure the transactions that made up that vote, as well as the voter registration system, so that we can have a stable, a stable data set upon which to conduct a realistic and rigorous audit. So let me stop there.
Thank you. I think that was great. I think you really, brought into perspective that this is an ever changing dynamic and this will be a constant issue. There is no such thing as complete security, and it's a spectrum. And as long as we can keep that on the more secure side of the spectrum, whether we're dealing with paper ballots or electronic ballots, we're facing the same issues and we have the same challenges, and our goal is to mitigate them and record any changes possible. So I think that was perfect. Thank you, Larry.